Hey, what's up you guys, it's Dorothy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to go into chapter 1 of The Women of the Bible Speak by Shannon Bream. So let's get right into this video. This video may have content you guys do not want to listen to. I highly doubt that it'll have any swear words in it, but it may. But if you guys do not wish to continue, you can click off the video now. You have been warned. Chapter 1, Sarah and Hagar, Women of the Covenants. Sarah, Genesis 11:27 through 12:20, Genesis 16:1 through 6, Genesis 17:15 through 9, Genesis 18:1 through 15, Genesis 20:1 through 18, Genesis 21:1 through 13, Genesis 23:1 through 9. The facts of Sarah's life sound like an adventure story full of twists and turns. She was settled into her life when her husband suddenly announced they'd be upending everything they knew and move way out of their comfort zone. She managed a wealthy household with a very complicated blended family, and that's not all. She bore no children of her own, and even when God made her a specific promise, she laughed it off as impossible. How surprised she must have been when that wildly unthinkable finally came true for her, but oh, how far off track she'd already gotten by taking matters into her own hands. According to the Bible, Abraham twice denied being Sarah's husband to protect himself when a powerful ruler noticed just how beautiful she was and wanted her for himself. In the case involving Pharaoh, Sarah was already 65 years old. Think about how enduringly stunning her beauty must have been to draw so much attention even as she was entering her golden years. While many details about Sarah are unknown, we do know this. She was definitely skeptical of men shining robes telling 90-year-old women they would have babies. So who was she beyond the few tidbits? In reading the story of Abraham and Sarah, it's hard not to focus on Abraham. After all, he was the one who received the call from God, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you," Genesis 12:1. It's the first hint we receive that this land God will show him, the promised land, is going to play a crucial part in salvation history. But along with the promises to Abraham, God repeatedly makes clear that Sarah will be a key player, that she will be a mother of nations, kings of people shall come from her, Genesis 17:16. If Sarah objected to their journey, Scripture does not record it. In order to avoid a famine, she and Abraham journeyed from Ur to Haran, from Haran to Canaan, and then from Canaan to Egypt. Sarah supported her husband during the dispute with his nephew Lot and during the subsequent battle with the 5 kings of Canaan. When he had to ride to Lot's rescue in Egypt, she was beautiful enough to attract Pharaoh's notice, which prompted Abraham to fudge the truth about who she really was. If you're wondering why Abraham felt compelled to lie, remember that he was a refugee traveling through a foreign land. This was a period when powerful rulers could claim beautiful women simply because they wanted them. A protesting husband could play with his life, a consequence of which Abraham would have been all too aware. Ultimately, the other men, moved by Sarah's beauty, rejected her when they realized she was married. The Lord himself directly intervened to protect her by sending plagues in the case of Pharaoh and by visiting Amalek with a warning. Abraham's fear put Sarah in danger and also put other men in positions where they could have sinned against God. Abraham's deceit didn't help anyone, and his behavior tells us something about his character. He was sometimes fearful and weak. In retrospect, it is rather remarkable that God chose a man like Abraham to be the patriarch of his chosen people, but perhaps he did this in order to demonstrate his power through Abraham's foolishness. As Paul notes in 2 Corinthians 12:9, God's power is made perfect in weakness. And in 1 Corinthians 1:27, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. In any case, Abraham's weakness of character had a marked influence on his marriage, and I often wonder how Sarah felt being placed in potential danger because of his decisions. Sarah herself is voiceless until chapter 16 of the narrative, when for the first time she has something to say. Now, Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar, so she said to Abraham, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave, perhaps I can build a family through her." Abraham agreed to what Sarah said, Genesis 16:1 through 2. It's almost as though Sarah was saying, okay, wait, hold up. I said nothing while you dragged us for hundreds of miles from Chaldea to Canaan to Egypt and back again. I said nothing while you talked about this covenant with God that you somehow think you have, and the special promises you say God has made you, but I've seen none of it happen, and if we're going to have an heir, then I'd better take matters into my own hands here. The first time we hear Sarah speak, she has a plan, but we, the readers, know it's not God's plan. We know God is weaving an intricate story starring Isaac, but Sarah is still skeptical. Just the chapter before, God pledges to Abraham that the one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Genesis 15:14. God has shown him that glittering night sky, promising him that his descendants would be as many as the stars in the sky, uncountable. Abraham was all in. The minute God said jump, Abraham said how high, but highly uncertain that any of this would come to pass. Sarah wanted evidence. She appears to have been the practical one in the relationship, not faithless, but not exactly trusting either. So she came up with the solution to what she saw was the problem of God's unfulfilled promise. Following ancient Near Eastern custom, Sarah hatched a plan to produce an heir, sending Abraham to go into her maid Hagar so she could obtain children through her. But as sometimes happens, when we stop trusting God's plan and go our own way, things went terribly wrong. The minute Hagar successfully conceived, the relationship between the two women imploded. In the Bible, Sarah complains to Abraham, I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. Genesis 16:5. Hagar likely lorded her pregnancy over Sarah. Genesis 16:4 translates to show us that Hagar considered Sarah a person of no standing because she was barren. So then the far younger Hagar was the only one bearing a child for Abraham. It might have been natural for Hagar to assume that her relationship with both Sarah and Abraham had changed. Her status had surely improved, and as the mother of Abraham's sole heir, the security for the future. So what was Abraham's reaction to the news that his wife's now pregnant servant despised her? Did he urge calm? Did he try to hear both sides of the dispute? Not exactly. Abraham said to his wife, your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think is best. Genesis 16:6. This is how the second time we see Abraham acquiesce to his wife's wishes. When we know Sarah is in the wrong, their relationship comes into sharper focus now. And it is a complicated one, marked by times when she speaks her mind and times when she silently follows his lead. In the instance, he attempted to restore peace in his relationship with Sarah by demolishing his relationship with the pregnant Hagar. Do whatever you please, he tells his wife, and Sarah does. The Bible tells us that Sarah dealt harshly with Hagar. Genesis 16:6. It's the same wording the Bible uses for the way the Egyptians treat their Jewish slaves in Exodus, meaning with opposition and forced labor. Abraham gave Sarah complete authority over Hagar, knowing what it would mean for the servant woman, and he stood by while Sarah abused the pregnant woman with impunity. In the reading any memoir of history of slavery in the American South or in the Caribbean, we find the stories detailing the mistreatment of pregnant women the most gut-wrenching. It's impossible for us as modern readers to dredge up any sympathy for Sarah at this point. But like the men of the Bible, the women of the Bible are complicated. They are, on the whole, neither fully good nor completely bad people, but simply people in all their messy and uncomfortable humanity. And it is when we can see them in their full humanity that God can teach us something about ourselves. The next time we hear from Sarah, she is once again skeptical of God's plan. In one of the Bible's most imaginative stories, God appears to Abraham at his tent by the oaks of the Mamre and tells him that Sarah will bear a son. The story is a strange one because the first verse of the chapter said God appeared to Abraham, but then the very next sentence said that 3 men stood before him. Genesis 18:1-2. Whatever happened at Mamre, it is clear that this was a very unusual visit, and that in this time it wasn't just Abraham God had come to see. Where is your wife Sarah? The 3 men ask him. There in the tent, he says. Then one of them says, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son. Genesis 18:9-10. This is the message for Sarah, loud and clear. When God appeared to Abraham before, he had told him that he would have a son of his body. This time he was more explicit. It will be a son of Abraham's body and of Sarah's. She is a central and covenant narrative. She is an equal recipient of the promise, and it's almost as though God were saying, pay attention this time. Sarah did, and her reaction was immediate. She laughed. She laughed, one of the most extraordinary reactions to a revelation from God recorded in the Bible. However, don't forget, just one chapter earlier, Abraham was just as incredulous. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? Genesis 17:17. At this point, Sarah was done with all the revelations, all promises. She had seen enough. She had hoped long enough. She'd tried long enough. She had twisted her life in knots enough. No more. And so the big reveal came. She laughed. Tell me another, Sarah thought. I'm going to leave it off right there. I will see you guys in part 2 of this chapter. Bye.